Okay, so we're here to make a documentary slash podcast about the Bitcoin revolution. What does it all mean? Uh, well, let's take a bigger picture, a deep picture. Beyond the obvious financial implications and the new financial facilities that Bitcoin has provided, including faster transactions, blockchain technology. Uh, so, what is really something that Bitcoin has brought us that is bigger than just financial? Why is it more important than simply as a financial currency? It goes back to what the idea of money is. And the money has become more and more important as we moved into capitalism. And capitalism was the 19th century's successor to the British Empire, the successor to uh, basically feudalism, aristocracy, and you mix that with some Darwinism, Victorian era uh, philosophy. And then we arrived at Adam Smith, who was a genius, and his idea that we must make production more efficient. He came up with the idea that uh, you must allow for more efficient production and exchange, and to make the role of uh, altruism less prevalent, and let everything be uh, guided by profit. And more importantly, the Adam Smith revolution, as he was called the father of capitalism or the father of economic theory, was that the idea was that in order for uh, capital to grow, you need to produce more than is needed to satisfy the basic means, the basic needs. So, as accumulation happens, then production becomes a commodity based production. And this leads to capital being exchanged and accumulated. So, this empowered, as a side effect, money, created money as the most important thing in a society. And then you have Karl Marx, who criticized the effects of capitalism. As you can say that in the 19th century, early 20th century, you could see that the effects of capitalism, unbridled capitalism, uh, don't forget it was also mingled with eugenics. So it was not what it is to what we think of today as capitalism, since the role of capitalism is constantly changing and being evaluated by different people. So Marx criticized capitalism because it created a labor as a commodity in which people valued price more than usefulness. So this was the big uh, critique that Marx had against capitalism. And so you could say that the rise of communism was an effect of the problems that capitalism had created, because capitalism is, like we said, not the one we have today. There was huge problems with the labors, the exploitation of labor. I mean, as we can read in Charles Dickens, and as we can see in the early 20th century, the exploitation of the workers was a huge problem. So Marx and socialism came as a response to that. And in America, there were the labor unions created. And then in Europe, there was a huge socialist movement. And then we have all that followed. So we have communism, what later became communism, as as a progressive movement to liberate the world from the negative effects of capitalism. And eventually, this communism, which was the implementation of Marx by Lenin and his ideologues in a very, I would say, strange way, and putting their Russian background into it, it turned into what became the Soviet Union, what became communism. Uh, so it's not exactly Marxism, even though they thought themselves as Marxist, but that's a huge topic. Well, all I have to say on this subject is that Lenin and communism came as a critique to the ills of capitalism, and so did socialism. I mean, socialism was opposed to capitalism, but in America, through this clash between socialism and capitalism, uh, emerged the middle class. And so we could say that America today is a society based on capitalist theory, but with a lot of socialist, I would say a minority socialist injection into it. And you could say that people like Ayn Rand, who are the big proponents of capitalism, they said, she said, she said that capitalism is the only morally socio-political system because it frees people to act in their rational self-interests, and asserted that no political economic system in history has ever proved its value so eloquently or has benefited mankind so greatly. So we have this pronunciation by Ayn Rand that, and this is basically where we are today, that this idea of individualism, this idea of individual rights, is the basis of America and the basis of the modern capitalism with injection of socialism. And it is the dominant system which uh, basically defines the wealthier nations of the world. And you could say that the rest of the world is basically trying to catch up and imitate this system. But in itself, it has a lot of problems, innate problems, which are now becoming more and more apparent. It's starting to appear that capitalism, modern capitalism that we have today, the two-party system, socialism injected into majority capitalism, uh, is starting to show some major cracks. And so the era of Ayn Rand is coming to a close. As we sit here in 2019, we see a world that is troubled, deeply, deeply divided and troubled. There's a rise in inequality. There's a huge increase in wealth for the minority. And so it seems that this capitalism that was in the 19th century, early 20th century, so virulent, is not actually going towards a balance where it would actually accept some forms of socialism in order to maintain this balance and keep the middle class happy. But in fact, it is like at war with this socialist half or less than half. And so, since the beginning of modern Western style capitalist societies, uh, the top industrialists and now the top 1% or 2% of the population that are the wealthy people are constantly waging a war against the rest of the system in order to maximize their benefits and keep their position and accumulate even more wealth. So what we have now is that the world is moving towards more and more capitalism, and the social aspect is being diminished, as we have now with the rise of Donald Trump. And you could add to that the fact that the American way of governing, the liberal democracy, the separation of powers, which was so important in developing the Western societies, is actually also being eroded. We're moving towards a unification or monopolization of power, and we have a fractured system in the West. We have rise of populist movements, movements who are anti-establishment. There's protests, there's corruption. The government, the rich people have found a way to influence the democracy. They have found a way to take over the process of governing. So it's becoming more and more obvious that what we thought was the separation of powers, what we thought was democracy and equality, relative equality, is actually in fact simply a manipulation of the elites into taking control of the rulership, just like they've always done. And we have the facade of this electoral system between Democrats and Republicans, and then we see that behind the scenes, the same actors, the same oligarchs are financing both sides, and they simply play this game where it appears as if the people really have a choice. I mean, how can really the people have a choice when money determines everything in politics? So then we have the old socialist attack coming back and trying to say that, okay, we need to socialize everything. That's the only solution. Make the government bigger, blah blah blah. But we saw that also failed. We saw that the government becoming bigger and controlling everything, it led to even more corruption. So we have now a vicious circle for humanity is at this point now. So what we do? Well, I think the answer is not to increase socialism. It's not Bernie Sanders. There is something that we have seen recently, the rise of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin as a currency, a decentralized currency, rose out of the minds of the cyberpunk movement. I believe in the 70s. It was a counterculture. They wanted to create a hacker's coin, a coin that was untraceable and private. And it was just basically that simple. And then we have the Satoshi, who I'm not going to get into who he is or who he's supposed to be, but his brilliant white paper laid out the blueprint for what Bitcoin would be and the idea of the blockchain, of the confirmations of a blockchain connected through the net, all encrypted, and every transaction being recorded and put into blocks, and all this system being connected together, and all existing virtually without any physical interaction. And we had the huge amount of backlash to this idea since the beginning, and the government tried to ban it and tried to outlaw it, but it's basically was not really able to do that. And so Bitcoin rose and rose, and now it's at the point where we're debating whether there should be regulation that should curtail Bitcoin as the big banking powers want, or should it be just let free? I think it's starting to be apparent that what Bitcoin is going to do is it's going to be a new way to view the emancipation of mankind into a new direction. This idea of decentralization is very, very deep, because if capitalism, if this old system, which has given us such good things, but at the same time has taken so much from us, this old dragon that we try to fix and to keep under our check through various means by using socialism, which failed. And now we came up with this idea of a balance between socialism, minimum socialism, into a capitalist model, which worked for a while. But it seems that capitalism just wants to dominate. It does not seek balance. And of course, it's a system which is based on consumption, and it's in its core, it's a 19th century uh, aristocrat uh, social Darwinistic system. It is a model that is quickly becoming uh, obsolete. And what is the solution? Technology is rising now, and this is why Bitcoin is very important, because what Bitcoin is becoming is a new way to look at money, which is the heart of capitalism. If we liberate money from the elites, because that's how they maintain their power, we liberate power from the elites. We wrestle power from the elites. And why would we do that? It's because what we really wanted as a people, what people always wanted since the times of ancient Greece, was freedom, was democracy, was freedom from tyrants. This is why democracy was such a beautiful idea when it first came out. Such an eloquent and beautiful idea. The people in ancient Greece, they wanted freedom from the aristocrats. They wanted people to make the decisions about who's going to lead. And that process became manipulated. And ever since then, we've been trying to get back to this people's ability to choose their own fate, of freedom, of people not being told what to do by a so-called higher power. And this is why Bitcoin is so important, because it was the first time where currency turned into a people's a commodity, not an object of controlled by the central government, by centralized institutions. Because as we can see, even though the government's supposed to change, even though we're supposed to have elections, the people do not elect the head of the central bank, the head of the financial institutions, who basically run the entire economy. We do not elect those people. Those people are supposed to be appointed by the president or by the politicians, which in turn get donations from them. It's a huge conflict of interest. This is not democracy. It's a manipulation. So understand that Bitcoin is much more than a currency. It was a new way of looking at human society. Are we going to become again and again tools of other people, of elites, of people who think that they are better than us, that they need to tell us what to do? Or why is a person from Wall Street more valuable than a person from downtown, from a normal person? They both have the same human qualities. They both go to the bathroom, they both eat, they both sleep. So why this person needs to make a decision for me of what I should do, or where should I go, where should I not go? This is the most important core, because humans are born to be free. We are not born to be slaves of other people. And it's because of this that we have always struggled against these tyrants, which try to control us. And here is a new way, a new tool, Bitcoin, which is leading this revolution. And this revolution, which is financial, like I said, it's going to attack capitalism itself, but not turn it into communism, which was corrupt. Turn it into a true democracy. Because if we imagine in 20 years from now, transactions are done by some sort of Bitcoin, because I consider all crypto as the children of Bitcoin, some sort of offspring of Bitcoin, okay? Let's say that merchants can transact without the intercession of banks, simply free market. And we're getting now to what is called as anarcho-capitalism, a political philosophy and economic theory which advocates the elimination of centralized states, okay? And it favors the self-ownership, private property, and free markets. I would say with some modifications, but yes, I like this idea, anarcho-capitalism. And it is that in the absence of a state, which is in its core a law, arbitrary, autocratic, and bureaucratic, it is completely under the control of the political special interest groups. If we didn't have this, then society would tend to contractually self-regulate and civilize through the spontaneous and organic discipline of the free market as a voluntary society. So in anarcho-capitalist society ruled uh, uh, by the people themselves, the laws, the courts, and all security would be operated probably by privately funded competitors selected by consumers rather than centralized. So this decentralization process is an idea that ties in with Bitcoin, and it was brought to the world through Bitcoin. And the ability of us, the people, to have our own money would lead us into this broader view of the society and make us think that maybe we should decentralize also our government. We are not living in a free society. We are, like I said, dictated by a government, which we're supposed to elect. So we're supposed to elect a government to tell us what to do. And that in itself is a contradiction, okay? I have the freedom to choose you to rule me. That's not freedom. But it gets even worse that the people that we're supposed to elect are actually not even elected by us. We're simply given a few choices by the elites, by the bankers, by the financial institutions that actually run the economy. They say, here, you have this guy, and that guy, determined through who has more money, who can make us feel better. And then you guys can choose one of these guys. And to forget about those other candidates who displease us. They'll never get elected. They won't have the money. Because, like I said, money is the key to the capitalist system that we have today. So, if we liberate ourselves from these ideas, then because we realize more and more that these people that are supposed to rule us beneficially, not only are they not letting us be free, but they are actually increasingly intimidating us and turning us into slaves. It seems that all power tends to centralize. And if you give some people power, they'll try to take more power. It seems that humans are still very simian in their consciousness, and they tend to try to dominate. And the solution to that is to decentralize rather than centralize. It should be that, like the system called anarcho-capitalism, where law enforcement, courts, and all other security services should be operated by privately funded competitors, selected by consumers rather than centrally through taxation. The money would be Bitcoin. It would be a decentralized, open market. Personal economic activities would therefore be regulated directly by victims and their directly selected agents through market-based dispute resolutions under contract law, rather than by statute through centrally determined punishment under political monopolies. Which sounds kind of interesting. Of course, this is theory. It needs to be fleshed out. But it's an interesting idea here. And all of this we can understand through Bitcoin. Of course, to make this happen, there's going to be a huge opposition, because these entities, the elites that indirectly control the government, let's say that they indirectly give us a choice which it's already predetermined. So they are the ones who control the government, the way that we live our life, basically. So by having a centralized hold on the law enforcement and legislative and the judiciary branch, they indirectly are our givers of life and death. They are our judge, our jury, and our executioner. This is a brilliant system of manipulation. This is a system which an elite group of people can effectively rule millions and millions of people through them being unaware that they're actually being ruled. And if there is those who are aware, Edward Snowden, they will be punished and removed, and their executors, the vicious and increasingly cruel, barbaric butchers, the so-called police and law enforcement, are showing the world their true colors every day by shooting people in the streets, by killing demonstrators. They have shown that they are completely inefficient. They are completely unworthy to call themselves law enforcement. And why are they like that, if you think about it? It's because they have ultimate power, and power ultimately will corrupt because they have absolute power. They are not elected by the people, they are appointed by our betters, and they have a huge lobby in government. Law enforcement is an industry which will never be touched by any president. They are the pillars of what makes this system work. So for us, the people, what do we do? How do we liberate ourselves from this parasitical relationship? Well, like I said, Bitcoin is a very good step, but it will be, I suspect, it will be viciously opposed. Right now, the elites have not opposed so bitterly Bitcoin because they don't think Bitcoin is a threat. And if you consider the wider financial markets, the total market share of Bitcoin is in the billions, and the financial portion controlled by the elite financial traditional institutions is in the trillions. So it's not really a threat, but we could see their reaction when Facebook started to think that they should create their own version of Bitcoin. You saw the hearings, you saw the vicious attacks. Now, I don't necessarily endorse Facebook because I don't really like Facebook anyway, but you could see that the fear in the eyes of those agents of the bankers, as the politicians should be called. They're simply banking agents. They are just eloquent speakers of the bankers. Those guys viciously attacked the idea of Facebook creating their own currency because they would realize, hey, wait a minute, Facebook is no small joke. They control a lot, they have a lot of power. And we don't want this to start into spiraling into that other institutions such as Facebook, other Silicon Valley companies would start to create their own blockchain projects and create their own currencies. So they want to, their strategy seems to be twofold. Regulate any threat that is posed by crypto out of existence and let crypto become just an illusion or a small joke, which doesn't really do anything effective. And secondly, create their own parallel pseudo Bitcoins or their own coins, which they will bill as this is our version, a much more secure version of Bitcoin. So they create their own currencies, cryptocurrencies. But there's a huge difference between a Goldman Sachs created currency and a real Bitcoin, a real crypto, is the centralization. This is the key word. That's why people need to understand why crypto is so important. What is a true crypto is a decentralized system of money. Bitcoin is not dependent upon any banks. And if you just simply create a virtual coin based on the real value held by a bank, that is not a crypto. That is not fulfilling the promise of what crypto and Bitcoin was supposed to be. So these guys will use those coins in order to deflect attention, in order to take over the crypto industry and make it their own. So we as a people, What can we do? We must support true crypto. We must support Bitcoin with all of our power that we the people have. Let us, because if you think about it, I know this is a cliche, but the power of the people, we are the vast majority of this planet. And the elites are a very, very small and tiny minority. So they're afraid of the people. They simply want to keep power. They create a very, very sophisticated illusion because they know that the people are mostly ignorant. We must educate ourselves and take advantage of the media revolution that has happened. Traditionally, the elites have had complete control over the media, and this is no longer the case. So let us educate ourselves. Let us go to YouTube, go to the internet and read the details of how Bitcoin works. What is real crypto? What is decentralization? This is a huge subject, which I'm not going to say it here. I'm just here to open the door. But realize the difference. That's the more important about what is true crypto, decentralization. Blockchain is not dependent on any country, on any government. It's simply a ledger, and it depends on confirmations. In the case of Bitcoin, there's other variations. 3 confirmations from mining computers will basically make that transaction permanent. It is a technology. It is a technology-based currency, not a centralized elite-based currency. And you'll know that another thing that the agents of the banking elites will say is, oh, Bitcoin is not real money. There's no physical Bitcoin, okay? You guys are just trading thin air, okay? This is a fallacy. This is a manipulation. Because what is real money? What is the money that they produce? $1 is a piece of paper. Think about that. In the 70s, before the 70s, every dollar had to be backed up by gold. And the financial elites achieved a major boon to their power when they created the Federal Reserve, and how they liberated